So you grew up on the family farm, and you know your first introduction to all this was as someone who worked on the land. So I'm curious, how did you end up playing the violin?
My father gave me 10 acres of land, and he said you can have all the corn you can raise on that to pay your tuition at college for the first year. So I spent the summer pouring water from our irrigation pumps on that 10 acres. Beautiful stand of corn, but it tasseled out in July, and the hot winds, 110 degrees, blowing fast and hot for 3 or 4 days, just burnt the tassels off the whole field. So I ended up with about $150 out of that field to pay my tuition at Oberlin. So maybe it was necessary that I get a scholarship in violin there, which I did. But early on, it was my parents' influence that made me take music as part of my life experience. My mother was a good singer, and they had friends who played the violin and used to invite him out every Sunday to play for us. I wanted to play clarinet. I didn't want to play violin because our neighbor boy, whom I really had admiration for, played clarinet. So my father handled it rather occasionally. I thought he went down to the local furniture store, where they handled musical instruments in those days, and brought home 2 violins. One of them was an old beat-up case with a crusty rosin-coated instrument inside. And he said, you can have this one, or you can have this one. He opened up a nice new violin case with a shiny violin. So of course I said, well, I'll take that one then. So that got me on the path of playing violin instead of clarinet. They never told me I couldn't play clarinet, but they just angled it over there.
So how old were you when you started? Because I'm sure back in those days there weren't little half-size violins and quarter size.
I was 8. Oh, never imagined a half-size violin in those days. I was 8. Of course, I got a full-size violin right away, which was too big for me. And the teacher was a trombone player at the school, and he didn't know anything about strings. He told me, I remember, don't loosen your bow when you finish playing because it'll wear out the threads in that screw. So I left my bow tightened up, and after about 6 months it looked like a dog's hind leg. And so my parents realized that I wasn't getting the kind of tuition I needed. So they took me to a teacher at the local college where, fortunately, there was a good teacher. Very young, progressive young fellow who had good training.
And what college was this?
That was Kearney State Teachers College in Nebraska.
And what were your early lessons like? What methods were they using back then?
Well, I've often thought this is an interesting thing. My teacher was, as I say, progressive, but he used the old standard curriculum, 4 books of Holman and 2 books of Kaiser and 1 book of Wolfhard and 1 book of Matzes and so on. So I went through all that standard literature and on into the solo literature from that viewpoint. But my teacher was always saying, it shouldn't be necessary to do all those etudes. He said, I'm going to work up a violin method of my own where it's based on compositions, where we take excerpts of compositions, real music, not manufactured music. And he started on that project, but he never had the drive or whatever was necessary to finish it up. So it was 40 years later when Suzuki came with the same idea. We're going to eliminate as much as we can of the etude material and concentrate on a progression of real music.
It's a little foreshadowing there of things to come.
Foreshadowing in my own, I never thought of it before I was connecting up with my early training.
So I'm curious, what did you audition on? What pieces did you play for Oberlin when you went there to audition?
I played the Wieniawski Legend. Had a little bit of the Mendelssohn Concerto.
No Bach?
No Bach. I had done amazingly little repertoire. One of the problems with the traditional way is you don't get into repertoire early enough because you spend 3 years on Sevcik, and then by that time, if you've done it right, you're ready to play any concerto, but it doesn't work that way.
Yeah, it would take a special temperament, I think, to survive. So the initial education is just all etudes, and so you earn your way to actually playing a piece of music.
Yeah. Well, when I went to Oberlin, the first year, my teacher took one look at my hand positions and bow holes and so on, said, get Sevcik Opus 1, number 1. And I was, for 9 months, I played nothing but Sevcek Opus 1, number 1. No orchestra, no ensemble, no solos. Finally, at the end of the year, he gave me a little minuet by Niels God or something, I forget who it was. And I said, well, at least it's a piece of music. He said, you better be careful or I'll take that away from you. He was mock anger, of course. He wasn't really that mean. But after that, I developed very rapidly in different directions. But I often think I almost gave up during that first year. It almost broke my spirit. I would have been, fortunately, my teacher was a good one. He almost made me like Sevcek, but not quite. But
That is quite a
the thing was, I also had a scholarship in the music department, which was effective for my second year. So if I hadn't had that, I probably couldn't have gone back there for any subject.